Hi, I'm Matt Arnold. I'm a digital learning experience designer and manager. I work with a small team of game developers, and we create learning experiences that are from the ground up, basically learning games and also simulations. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about extra life learning and designing digital game-based learning. Basically, what my team does in the higher education industry. So, taking a look first at what digital learning is, it's kind of difficult to define. If we look at the Every Student Succeeds Act from 2015, it defines digital learning as any instructional practice that effectively uses technology to strengthen a student's learning experience and encompasses a wide spectrum of tools and practices. Now, that's a really broad general definition of what digital learning is, but we focus primarily on learning games. So, how can we develop games from the ground up that incorporate learning objectives and learning outcomes of what we want students to accomplish and achieve? And if we do it right, students will be sucked into the game so much they won't even remember that they're learning something. It's more fun for them. So, what we try to do on our team of game based learning developers is we try to look at the learning approaches and theories. What kinds of pedagogy is out there, different ways that students learn, particularly adult learners in higher education. What are ways that we can intrinsically motivate them and draw them into that learning experience overall. And we focus a lot on games, and games are a really strong motivator, and it's also a way to get students into a flow, into a rhythm of learning different types of skills and different types of knowledge and concepts that they need in order to be successful later on. So we take all those learning approaches and theories and the learning objectives and outcomes that students need to achieve by the end of their course, and we look at that first. Then we take what we know about good game design and we build our digital learning resources, all of our digital learning games and that from those learning outcomes. So we don't do it from the other way around, where a lot of games try to kind of force fit those learning outcomes into the game itself. We do it the other way around. We look at that learning outcome first, and then we build our game from the ground up based off of what we want students to accomplish and achieve. And that brings together a whole more cohesive and a stronger and richer learning experience for students. So, in looking at our team and what my team develops for higher education right now, currently, we focus on three primary areas. So, interactivities, those are more of your traditional e learning activities, maybe multiple choice, some matching, hotspots, a lot of the things that you might be able to create really quickly and easily in a rapid development tool such as Articulate Storyline or Adobe Captivate. Some of the more traditional instructional design tools that you might use to create those types of experiences. And we found that those are very successful in helping students learn, but they're not that rich learning experience that really is memorable for students. And the more memorable that we can make it for the students, the more they're going to retain that knowledge and information later on. So we do develop some of those. Those are interactivities. We also develop immersive learning. We're just starting to get our toes into that area. That's more where we get into augmented reality, virtual reality. How can we take game-based types of learning and what we know about good game design, and how can we overlay that with simulations and AR information that students might need on the job site or within a particular environment where they're learning a specific skill. So that would be more of our immersive learning. And also looking at learning games themselves, more of our traditional learning games. A lot of our learning games we develop for the web, so we try to use Unity and other types of tools to develop these rich web-based experiences so that students can access them. What we found is that if you're downloading apps or installing software, and students have to do that in order to learn from a game, it's very difficult for them to get the tools and information that they need to successfully install that. So we tried to like eliminate as many barriers to getting access to the game as possible. And one way that we found that has been very successful so far is by making them web-based. So we do a lot of that in developing our learning games. We try to make it as accessible and scalable as possible. Taking a closer look now at what our development process looks like when we're developing games and learning experiences for higher education, we kind of do fall into this agile ADDIE type design process, but we've modified it quite a bit. We've got designing and planning. We take a look at the learning outcomes first, and then we build our storyboards and maybe a proof of concept even, so that we can help instructors and subject matter experts who are really creating the curriculum side of things, help them to better understand what this might look like in that experience. Because what we found is a lot of subject matter experts and instructors, they don't have a background in developing learning games. So we need to kind of give them a proof of concept to help them better visualize that experience and what it might look like for the learner. This might also include wireframes or any other types of visuals that we can put together to help them fully understand the concept and the idea. Then we begin developing it, construct the digital learning experience based on those design plans that we created up front. Once that's developed and ready to go out, we test it, we review it, we make sure it's accurate. We have different types of testers. I might be testing it for more quality assurance, also looking at the game mechanics, the functionality of the game itself, visuals of the game. But we also have our subject matter experts, our deans, and also instructors looking at it from an accuracy standpoint. Is the content accurate? Is it going to get the students the information they need to be successful in the course and also later on after the course? Once that's all been approved and we've done our revisions, then we deploy it. We get that out the door. Right now, we're deploying it through a server, and also we've done some work on getting Unity projects to be LTI integrated within a learning management system. So we've tried to make that a very seamless experience for the student. Then we try to get as much feedback as possible from all of our stakeholders. That includes the students. We want to make sure that they're having a good time going through the activity and the experience overall, but also, are they getting the information that they need in order to be successful? Once we've gotten all that feedback, we may have to go back to designing and planning again, or we may need to jump over to developing something a little different. Maybe we tweak some of the game mechanics a bit. Maybe they're too difficult, or they're not meeting the objectives that we need them to meet. So there might be some tweaks and different things that need to be adjusted or revised after we get that feedback. But hopefully we've rolled out a pretty decent product once we get to that point. The more planning we can do up front, the better the experience and the better the product. So, taking a look at gameful learning experience design. This might include some of the top 5 digital learning trends of last year, of 2019, looking at AI specifically. How can that be used within learning games? Learning analytics. How can we take what students are doing inside those learning games, be able to analyze some of that data and better understand what skills and what learning objectives they're meeting and what learning objectives they need help with? And how can we help the instructor understand those analytics to use that to change their instruction, so that way they can help reinforce some of those concepts. Also, gameful design is really big. That's the third top learning trend right now. Immersive learning I touched on earlier, and also interactives. So game-based learning is really starting to take off now as we start to look more at some of the digital learning trends that are going on in higher education. One of my favorite people to follow on Twitter is Matthew Farber. He's the assistant professor of technology, of innovation, and pedagogy at the University of Northern Colorado. And he says video games can engage players with more than just action. Impactful games are about serious topics and can create conditions for deeper learning. So not only are video games fun and enjoyable for students and learners, but they're also very impactful, and you can have some very serious topics and create these different environments and situations in a video game that really touch on deeper learning topics. So you're creating the conditions that are right for this to be a memorable learning experience for all students. Also, when you look at traditional game mechanics, American video game designer Jesse Schell describes four elements of game mechanics to really look at. And these also cross over with learning theory. So, when you look at what we know is good in learning and learning theory, when you take a look at that and then compare that with what game developers and game designers use for game mechanics, um, there's a lot of crossover there. So first of all, we look at the mechanics. We look at how basically these are the rules. This is setting up the challenge. It's the goal of the game and how players can and cannot try to achieve that goal. So basically, setting up front. Here's what you need to do. Here's your challenge. Giving students a challenge is can be very rewarding for the student and the teacher. And that's part of the game mechanics itself. What are the rules and the conditions around playing in this environment in order to achieve your goal? Also, developing a strong story. A rich story in a game can also be very authentic to students, and it can also take what they're learning in the classroom and make it more real, make it more relevant to them. It can be linear and prescriptive or emergent and branching. You can have all different kinds of stories that you can intertwine through your game to make that a really rich learning experience. Aesthetics, how the game looks, sounds, smells, tastes, feels, all of those things. The aesthetics of a game should reinforce the other elements of the game to create a truly memorable experience. If it doesn't look good, students are going to be turned off by it and they're not going to be wanting to play the game in order to learn the material they need to learn. It's basically putting up a barrier between you and the learner. And we want to break down those barriers. So if we make it good, really engaging and fun, they're going to want to play it and they're going to want to be engaged in it. The last thing is the technology. So when we look at technology, that could be from anywhere from paper and pencil to lasers and rockets, right? The tech that you choose for a game allows it to do certain things and not to do other things. The tech is the medium in which the aesthetics take place, in which the mechanics will occur, and through which the story will be told. So the technology binds all that together. And it's one of the reasons why we took a really close look at how we can deliver our game based learning experiences on the web. It's one of the reasons why we chose that. Taking a look now at industry and how game-based learning is being used, Ally recently paired up with Parker Brothers and came out with a Monopoly game. They were able to use on phones. It integrated augmented reality, so it pulled that type of technology into it. It was a really neat, fascinating idea. And the reason they did this was because they found that almost half, about 41% of U.S. consumers say that they don't feel as confident as they'd like to about money concepts and other types of financial concepts and topics. So, gamified experiences like playing virtual Monopoly in real life could help people more deeply understand their finances. 4 out of 5, about 81% Americans, say money related board games like Monopoly are helpful in teaching basic money concepts, while 7 in 10 who played money related games as a child, which is roughly 71%, say that doing so helped make them more comfortable with money concepts. And that's all per Ally's survey that they did. They did this research behind rolling out this project. Ally Financial is transforming U.S. cities into virtual game boards that smartphone users can play via augmented reality. Ally plus Monopoly, which is inspired by the Hasbro board game, excuse me, not Parker Brothers, but Hasbro, offers a gamified experience aimed at promoting financial literacy. So this is just one way that game-based learning has been used to help consumers basically understand finances a little bit better. So it's a learning experience that's developed into a game and has really taken off. It's quite an interesting project. Dr. James Paul Gee, also a professor of literacy studies, he's an education researcher at the Arizona State University. Amazing books on how video games can be used in literacy development and literacy education. He says when the character you are playing dies in a video game, you can get sad and upset, but you usually also get pissed that you have failed. And then you start again, usually for a saved game, motivated to do better. So what he's saying here is basically games are a safe place for us to fail. Digital learning games, they promote perseverance, motivation, engagement. You basically get an extra life. The safe, it's only a game type of mentality, that's really big with experimentation of ideas, concepts, and symbols that may help students develop domain specific schema, which are ways of thinking that they can start to use to develop and demonstrate the particular nuance and mindset more typical of domain experts than of novice learners. And that's from Ambrose from 2010. Basically, you get an extra life. The experimentation of a game allows you to continue learning and trying new things. And as you do that, it's replacing schema or creating new schema in your mind that allows you to retain that information and those concepts better. So the more memorable the experience and the more they have to try and be successful on their own is going to be more motivating, more rewarding for the student, and also is going to help them retain that information for later on to be successful in life. The elemental replay, do-over, or extra life gives participants the permission to fail with minimal consequences. Failure in an effective game equates to an additional level of content, as it makes the player reconsider his or her approach to a game. The act of failing multiple times makes the act of winning much more pleasurable. And that's from Kevin Bell from his book Game On. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Kevin Bell does a great job of explaining how video games and learning theory overlap and combine with each other to create these great learning experiences. Kevin Bell, the book is called Game On. I highly recommend it. Lastly, I want to leave you with this quote from a psychologist and an educational philosopher. He's really big in learning theory. His name is Jean Piaget. He says knowledge is a consequence of experience. So the learning experience, that memorable experience that you create with a game that's built on the foundations of learning outcomes and objectives is going to be much more powerful to students and learners than any type of lecture or PowerPoint slide presentation could ever be. Thank you very, very much. Again, my name is Matt Arnold, and you can reach me online just about anywhere under the handle MattBit, and that's MattBit with a 4 instead of an A. Thanks again.